Advanced TV Herstory, the podcast that brings you fresh perspective on the importance of TV in our lives. We tell stories of leadership, persistence, and achievement of TV women, because in the lives of women, no other media platform has influenced or inspired so many. Lo, these 60 years. Women of all ages have been impacted by what they've seen and will see on TV. So join us for a little Advanced TV Herstory by streaming it directly on our website, tvherstory.com, or anywhere you find podcasts. I'm your host, Cynthia Bemis Abrams. Hey listeners, it's the first quarter of 2020, and there's a lot being said about American women feeling exhausted. All this persisting and resisting and explaining and calling out. And that's on top of all the things that are already on your list. Doing the laundry and flossing and remembering to pick up the kids from daycare. Most days it can feel like it's too much, and we're all tired. Well, loyal listeners, I'll give you a heads up that this episode of Advanced TV Herstory stems from research I'm doing for my book. As we assess cultural progress and determine kind of the root of our frustration, maybe that frustration is rooted in a lack of progress, we really have to ask ourselves what it will require of this diverse nation like ours to get to a greater point of equity. And I got to wondering how it is that LA law can provide me with some clues. Yes, LA law. What a glamorous, full-bodied TV series, and it ran from 1986 to 1994. In political terms, it finished out the last half of Ronald Reagan's second term as president and George H.W. Bush's only term. If you look at it from a generational perspective, the baby boom, it was their last gasp. They were graduating from college when it started and having babies by the time it ended. Listeners, you need not have watched a single minute of LA Law to follow along on this episode of Advanced TV Herstory. This is all about the context of the times. And creators Stephen Bochco and Terry Louise Fisher, who set the stage for a series and an ensemble cast that had the potential to transform society. It was a workplace drama that mirrored diversity, or attempted to. Story arcs that were reflective of that changing workplace of the 80s, because there was a lot actually changing. And the people who were the change agents, who were taking on the establishment, who were bringing in the new ways. All of that was taking place behind the name placard Mackenzie Brackman, located in Los Angeles, California. And this series, though it was progressive in many ways, did so with men writing and directing a cast comprised of predominantly white men. Today in Advanced TV Herstory, I'll talk about how watching this series, which I do not so much for entertainment, but rather for the social cues and the clues and the understanding, is I find it a valuable exercise also in exploring feminism's high and low points. So we'll look at workplace culture, the pilot episode's women characters, and a riveting story arc and performance by the incredible Alfre Woodard in that 2-hour pilot episode. So you can ask, is LA Law really a time capsule of workplace culture? Well, I will say, having worked in an office during the series run, yes, sort of. I mean, it's TV after all, right? So we have to suspend a certain amount of reality. The series came to us from the brain of Stephen Bochco, who had set an incredibly high bar for quality TV with Hill Street Blues. And he ultimately partnered to create LA Law with Terry Louise Fisher, who had been an emerging force on Cagney and Lacey. So the stories emerging from the law drama were well-written arcs that touched on the many social issues of the day, just like Hill Street Blues and Cagney and Lacey were doing. And there were so many. LA Law captures the times for sure, and the workplace by extension. You take Mackenzie Brackman's women office workers, the word subservient comes to mind. It's kind of painful, but you know what? There could be an older woman in your life who looks at that, and that was her life, and she felt good about it. And this is the part where we have to just sort of suspend our judgment for a moment, because in many ways this was reflective of the good and the bad of what was going on in the 80s. Administrative assistants produced documents on typewriters and answered phones and relayed messages and performed personal chores for the attorneys that they worked for, all while wearing high heels, like high heels, professional dresses or suits, and hair that took at least 30 minutes of their morning. That's for the staff. That's for the office workers. Then there was the emergence of the professional women. In this case, from the pilot, the lawyers Associate Ann Kelsey, played by Jill Eikenberry, and Abby Perkins, played by Michelle Green. They are the two primary women lawyers in the pilot. Listeners, do you remember your Hill Street Blues? Do you remember seeing Joyce Davenport? Ann Kelsey and Abby Perkins are a lot like Joyce, only they're a few years later. And LA is sunnier than wherever Hill Street Blues took place. And if you haven't already, with regard to this podcast, go deep into our episode archive for that early look at the impact that Hill Street's Joyce Davenport and Sergeant Lucy Bates had on law and law enforcement careers for women in the 70s. I love that episode. It's entitled Hill Street Blues, Davenport and Bates. I love that episode. And I do so because, first of all, I was just learning to podcast. And secondly, I truly believe that girls and young women saw themselves in Joyce Davenport and was able to go through and find statistics, employment statistics, and trend statistics about women in law and law enforcement. What was not to like about Joyce Davenport? She was this anomaly within this otherwise very street smart environment. She was highly skilled and she was determined to achieve justice, swimming in the world of grit and often petty criminals, sometimes silly crimes, but she did so as a public defender. And so she was leveraging her privilege as a white woman. And listeners, I will repeat one more time, just in case some writer at SVU is listening, that my dream cameo is Veronica Hamill, who played Joyce Davenport on Law & Order as Judge Joyce Davenport. Just once. I would love that. Okay, back to the pilot of LA Law. Ann Kelsey and Abby Perkins are working for the firm. They're in general litigation. And in the pilot, neither one of them is particularly happy with their situation in life. You start to try to figure out why were things positioned the way they were, and was perhaps there's some sense of voice from the male writers or even from Terry Louise Fisher herself, who had been an attorney and a prosecutor, that we needed to make sure that we knew that the women weren't happy, that professional women were situated with this sort of martyrdom situation, that they had to sacrifice marriage for the job, that there was no way that they could have a healthy relationship alongside it, or in the case of Abby Perkins, that the job had ruined their marriage or had somehow created a crack or a division that was irreparable, and she had an alcoholic husband. And so there was this little extra drama that we get for the women that we don't necessarily get for the men. And we also learn in the pilot episode that 35-year-old Ann is not willing to be silent about the overall firm culture. This is revealing.
Pending trial, Merton versus Merton, a new matter. Leon Kroner, a medical corporation, versus Celia Robinson.
A doctor is suing our client for a $750 bill.
A collection matter?
It's a little more complicated than that. For the last 9 months, her insurance company's been giving her the runaround, and that's why the bill's not paid.
Miss Perkins, undoubtedly you've seen those ads on television? Lawyers in polyester suits soliciting for clients?
Yes, sir.
Those lawyers handle $750 collection cases. Mackenzie, Brackman, Cheney et al. does not handle $750 collection cases.
Douglas, will you come off it? This is a referral from Morley Saperstein. I asked Abby to help me with it.
As your time is usually billed at $135 an hour, Miss Kelsey, how much exactly did you intend to charge this client for whatever heroics you might perform on this $750 matter?
What I intend is to charge her nothing.
Is it your belief, then, that we are running a welfare state here?
Absolutely not. It is my belief that this firm is an example of the capitalist system at its very finest. Management getting fat off the sweat and blood of the workers. Take me, for example. You bill my time at $135 an hour, 1,600 hours a year, for a total of $216,000 into the bulging coffers of this firm. Of that amount, I, who generated the income, get $52,800. You're damn straight this is not a welfare state, Douglas. And if I want to make a couple of phone calls to an insurance company to keep some poor working woman from getting screwed over by the system, then I will do it.
Well, due to the tragedy we've all suffered today, it would appear that everyone is unusually testy, fractious, and argumentative. Accordingly,
This meeting is hereby adjourned.
Okay, so it's the mid-'80s. Sounds about right. Perhaps a bit bolder than might have happened in nearly any other law firm in America, given that Anne is only an associate, and she could have been fired for that outburst, certainly reprimanded, and there would be something in her permanent file. But still, music to the ears of women at all levels. You know, it's 9 to 5, coming from the voice of a woman who is very much in the thick of being able to make change happen. So Anne mentors Abby Perkins, who is a summer associate, and the backstory of her trying to make her way in the world. As a summer clerk, she's one step closer to becoming an associate. The other summer clerks are men, and they are all seemingly more aggressive and more confident than Abby. So think about it. If they were to reboot LA Law in 2020 or next year, and I'm not suggesting they do, I think there have been notions of it, and Kelsey would be 70, give or take. Still within the range to run for president of the United States. Or, looking at it a bit differently, it's how possibly Elizabeth Warren's early years in the practice of law, which she talks about every once in a while in terms of sexism in the workplace, how that might have gone in California if it had been on TV. Abby Perkins in 2020 could still very well be practicing law as a senior partner somewhere. Very interesting. Since LA Law lasted many seasons and a law firm is by nature filled with competitive people, the series offers interesting insight to the transfer of power from the greatest generation to the baby boom. And again, I'm only looking at this right now from the pilot. I'm hoping that I will end up creating other episodes that sort of further reveal LA Law to be a time capsule worthy of further study. Under the surface, on the generational level, we can see that the older partners readily patronize, or they will make outright sexist, you gasp, inappropriate remarks to women, whether they are the attorneys or the support staff or clients. It's kind of pervasive. And then listen closely and you sense a certain amount of hostility. I guess listen and watch closely. You get this hostility from the middle-aged partners, the ones who are positioned to lead the firm. 10 years earlier, it was the thick of the ERA, and there was no question that they had to evolve. But they really don't want to. They do not want to have to be accountable to change the firm, to change the culture that has brought them forward so that it includes and respects women and persons of color, and anyone who doesn't look or sound like they. The pilot features a story arc about a closeted gay partner and his transsexual mate. 1986. So just when you think you can throw the whole series away, they put something in there that makes you say, this should get interesting, right? Now, we may never know in that pilot who was the more progressive story creator and then who led that going forward, Bochco or Fisher. But we should be grateful that in this pilot they set an open-to-anything sort of tone, right there, from the get-go. Plots in the first and second seasons are the result of a strong hand of Terry Louise Fisher, who again had been the veteran writer and producer on Cagney and Lacey. And if you go back and watch, whether it's the whole box set or just an episode here and there was no question that Cagney and Lacey was cutting edge, that they were revealing a lot of different side social topics, whether it was substance abuse or date rape or women trying to juggle family life with a demanding career. In the early seasons of LA Law, the scripts were written by men or Fisher. Fisher and Bochco often collaborated on the story but left the writing to the team of men, which, combined with the direction, begins to tip all of the aspects of production toward a definite male eye and ear. Taking a close look at the plot, even from the pilot, too, gets you to a whole lot of men fixing and saving and righting wrongs. There is a savior element here. And perhaps rightly so, lawyers have the power, and they certainly had the power in 1986. And the women that they represented or they talked about or were pursuing, they generally didn't. Put on your cultural anthropology hat for a second and watch LA Law to see how the workplace dynamics did or did not respond to the influx of women in the workplace. In some ways, women were tamped down, and that dialogue brimming with frustration, just like Ann Kelsey did in that meeting, it feels like it could be written today. And that is on a couple different story arcs, actually, just within this pilot. And within that frustration, there are bits of full-blown agency performed with this incredible passion. And by watching it, you can almost hear the glass break. You can feel proud for a moment and believe that change was and is possible. That if she has the guts to say it, if they had the guts to write it and stick it in this TV series, well, then you know what? I feel better that I can take that stand when I next need to. This Me Too minefield, at least in the LA law example, the baby boom was a distinctly competitive generation, and still is. This is what we're seeing played out on the national stage today. Because when you think about it, how work got done and how people communicated back in 1986, the younger associates or the junior associates in the firm, they didn't have any sort of advantage of getting the job done other than their sheer time and fortitude. It was their ambition, their competitiveness, and their willing to put in the time, often at great personal sacrifice, enter the whole, personal life thing. That was the ingredient to success. That was how the older generation saw themselves in you, that you had the wherewithal to be the player to advance. That's really important when we think about all the different tools we have today and how people have sort of come to understand what their strengths are and how that should impact their role. It was very much a different, much more generalist culture, and everything that you had to put on the table involved your personal stake in wanting to help the team win. It was all about experience and knowledge and, in a sense, time served. This was before work-life balance really became a thing. It was all or nothing. Hell, the older half of the baby boom gave us Gen X and its self-sufficient mindset and the latchkey experience. So to some degree, Ann Kelsey and Abby Perkins represent women who were intent on making the most of their education and the opportunity that had been created for them out of Title IX and the ERA. And yet, in this series, we see them sacrifice according to the rules that applied to men and break out of that sacrifice. And I do hope that the passage of time, lo these 40 years, have eased that pervasive judgment that filled the years during LA law and the subsequent years when women were really made to feel awful for having to try to make the decision or embark on trying to balance it all. Then and now, everyone is doing the best that they can. So while watching an episode of LA Law may leave you wincing, as it did me, I feel compelled to watch just one more because I'm always curious to see what I will hear, what little clue I will pick up that gives me the evidence to understand how far we've come in that progress for rights and opportunities, and also how they continue to be impacted by sexist, racist, or ableist ways even today. All right, so I hear you. You're saying, geez, Cynthia, you started this episode reminding us that we're exhausted. Give us some relief, right? Oh, listeners, the salve for your sore feet and sleepless nights is this clip from the pilot. And its content is dark, but its spirit is high. It celebrates an excellent performance from Alfre Woodard and the seasoned writing that earns a pilot rave reviews and a green light to 13 episodes from the typewriter of Terry Louise Fisher. This is her gift to us. The incomparable Alfre Woodard has filed rape charges against 3 young men, one of whom is the son of a wealthy Mackenzie Brackman client. We see a woke Michael Cusack, an attorney from Mackenzie Brackman, played by Harry Hamlin, maybe 30 years old, struggling with the morality of representing this arrogant young man who confesses under attorney-client privilege that he is in fact guilty of participating in the rape. Cusack is made even more uncomfortable when he learns that the alleged victim, Alfre Woodard, has leukemia and presents as a very credible victim. Now, even still, it's the 80s, so the victim is black, and you'd think with a woman judge, she might just catch a break. Okay, listeners, I know what you're thinking. No, that woman judge was not Judge Joyce Davenport, but you got to admit that would have been cool. No, what you're about to hear is Alfre Woodard on the stand, first questioned by the prosecutor, who is attempting to convict the 3 young men, so more sympathetic line of questions. And the second lawyer is a public defender of one of the other men. And I point this out only because through the entire story arc in the courtroom scenes, Michael Cusack seems repulsed by the defense team's approach, and you'll recognize this, yes, the defense team's approach, of which he is one of the defense team, to blame the victim and ruin her credibility. So, you know what? We now finally have an ally, a male ally, who knows the system, who certainly recognizes that it should not be the victim's credibility and reputation that is impugned. It was not the victim who invited the assault by men.
May proceed.
Call Miss Adrian Moore, Your Honor. One last question, Miss Moore. Did Officer Feeble-Corn take you to an emergency hospital?
Yes, Hollywood Presbyterian.
Did she wait for you while you were being examined?
Yes, and then she drove me home.
Thank you, Miss Moore. I have no further questions.
Mr. Kavanaugh, cross.
Miss Moore? Now, on direct examination, you testified that on the date in question, you purchased a soft drink
Yes,
at a convenience store.
and some eggs and milk.
And it was approximately what time that you went out to get this soft drink?
2.
In the morning?
Yes,
Do you normally get a craving at 2 in the morning for sugary soft drinks?
sometimes.
Especially when you've been drinking heavily? Mouth gets all woolly?
Objection.
I wasn't drinking.
Withdraw the objection.
Were you smoking dope?
Objection. Irrelevant.
Your Honor, this would be directly relevant as to the issue of consent.
Overruled.
Had you been smoking a green, leafy substance commonly referred to as marijuana that evening?
Yes, a little. You see, the chemotherapy makes me nauseated, and the marijuana helps.
Objection, non-responsive. I would ask that everything after the witness answered yes, she had been smoking marijuana be stricken from the record.
Objection sustained. Reporter will strike everything after the word yes.
I don't understand. Why can't I explain?
Miss Moore, please, just answer the questions as they're asked of you. Now, you were alone when this alleged incident occurred.
Yes.
And had you been alone all evening?
Yes, I was home watching TV.
Alone all night, smoking dope by yourself and watching TV.
Objection. Asked and answered.
Sustained. Move on.
The scene is selected for its progressive value. There is no other testimony scene, really. It's just enough for us to learn in the series pilot that, yes, young attorney Cusack is disgusted by these defense tactics and what he sees as a racist, misogynistic court system.
Thank you. But just to set the scene, there you are. Having a joint or two, you're watching the tube, and maybe feeling a little lonely.
I'm used to being alone.
But sometimes it's nice to have a little human contact. So you get the idea to go to the all-night market to see a human face, maybe have someone to talk to.
I didn't talk to anyone. I bought my food, and I left. And then these animals
Objection!
dragged me.
Non-responsive, motion to strike.
Sustained.
Miss Moore, how is your health?
I have leukemia.
Oh, I'm very sorry, Miss Moore. And I hope you forgive my insensitivity when I ask what the prognosis for recovery is.
Lousy. I'm going to die.
Have the doctors told you when?
Objection. Mr. Kavanaugh seems to be on a fishing expedition.
Your Honor, I ask the court's indulgence and latitude as this is an issue of some delicacy.
Miss Moore, no one regrets more than I any pain this line of questioning may cause you. I'll allow you a little more room, Counselor, but get on with it, please.
Thank you. How much longer have you got, Miss Moore?
Less than 6 months.
Well, I would imagine that there must be a great many things you've always wanted to do, but might not get a chance to do now.
I suppose.
And I know that if it were me, I would try to cram all of these things into the short time I had left, even if these things weren't the kind of things I might have done before.
I don't understand.
Well, like recreational drugs, marijuana.
I told you that was for the side effects of the chemotherapy.
Right. You pull up to a convenience store, a little high on weed. You see 3 good-looking young men in a hot car.
You got to be kidding.
Gather ye rosebuds while ye may, Miss Moore.
What does that mean?
A literary illusion that suggests that if you only had 6 months to live, you might as well have a good time before you go.
This is sick.
Isn't it true that you solicited my client to have sex with you?
No!
And isn't it true that when my client expressed some initial reluctance, you went up to him and pressed against him and fondled him?
No!
Isn't
Your
it
Honor,
true
please!
that you said, and I quote, "I've never taken on 3 guys. I want you to do it to me, and I want you to do it rough."
You despicable bastard!
Miss Moore.
Your Honor, I ask the witness be admonished.
This is perversion!
Your Honor,
I
please.
want to know who is on trial here.
Any further outbursts, Miss Moore, and I'll hold you in contempt.
Feeling is mutual.
Sit
Your
down.
Honor, under the circumstances, I ask we move for continuance until such time.
Until such time as what? I
I'm
die?
warning you, Miss Moore.
Is that a tactic? Accuse me? Wear me down? Move continuouses until I quit or die?
I warn you.
I warn you! This door swings both ways. If I can't get justice here, I will get a gun and I'll do it myself.
That's enough. You're in contempt.
Your Honor, she's threatening
You
us.
think I won't? What have I got to lose? I'll be dead before you can ever get me to trial.
Bailiff, escort Miss Moore to the basement holding facility until such time as she wishes to apologize to this court.
Now, the good news is that the writers did not, thankfully, rely on the angry black woman trope, I'm sure you saw it coming, that would have put Alfre Woodard in the position of having to seek her own justice. That would have been a turnoff. But the writers, Terry Louise Fisher, most likely fought passionately to make the viewer uncomfortable, that this would be the start of L.A. Law's legacy as some transformational series, progressive. So what happened to Alfre Woodard's character? Well, here it is. Michael Cusack and his troubled heart and his conscience, they worked, and they sort of worked within the system, to bring forward more evidence, technically evidence, to convict his client. It's a bit of an ethical quandary if you're a lawyer. There are some really redeeming parts to L.A. Law, like Michael Cusack. But then there was this bro culture on full display, which even 10 years ago, I don't think we would have been quite as repulsed by. But now we can see it, and it's considered the norm. In 1986, there was no reason to apologize for it. Now, again, Terry Louise Fisher herself had practiced law, and she was a prosecutor, and Stephen Bochco, together they led the series for 2 seasons. And then there was a shakeup, a parting of ways, and at least one lawsuit filed by Terry Louise Fisher, which created a settlement which came with a non-disclosure agreement. You see where I'm going here? Fisher made a few public statements intent on getting past this whole sordid affair, and she said she was intent on embarking on new quality projects. I hope to do more research to understand why we've never heard from Fisher again, why her IMDb and Wikipedia profiles are like 3 sentences long. Stay tuned, listeners, for more courtroom drama, because I sure hope to find it. Similarly, why we are celebrating women who are perhaps not recognized enough, well, Alfre Woodard is. She has earned trophies. She is recognized by her peers for her excellence. She's one of those actors who delivers her very best and has now been doing it over 4 decades, 5, I think. Take a look at her body of work. She's amazing. Spend a moment just saying, Alfre Woodard, you are a rock star. Let's celebrate that and all that Alfre Woodard's contributions to TV are, and feel good about a woman who has made it through. Stay tuned for more missives from the hashtag #MeTooMinefield that was LA Law. Clips in this episode of Advanced TV Herstory are from the series pilot, and don't forget to scroll all the way back in our archives to nearly the beginning for that episode about Hill Street Blues' Davenport and Bates. Listeners, the rough audio quality of that episode is more than made up for by the well-researched look at how women seeing women be uniformed cops and feisty lawyers led to an uptick in the numbers of women entering those fields. Isn't that exciting? That's what representation is all about. Head over to tvherstory.com to access the archive directly, sign up to receive our newsletter, or connect on social media. This tune is Take Me Higher by Jazzer and is found at Free Music Archive. Listeners, I leave you with this. How will we get over being exhausted? We need to celebrate each other, remind ourselves that we're doing the best we can. Good job. And while we're at it, we can be grateful that 80s hair is only found in museums. We will never have to commit 30 minutes or more a day to our hair, I hope. But seriously, we need to learn from the past, even by watching TV, so that we can better relate to all generations. If we are going to be in this resistance and this persistence and this march for change, then we really need to all be in it together. That's where we are the strongest. And this is why I podcast about TV women. I'm your host, Cynthia Bemis Abrams. Go out there and be brave.